Hi, my name is Doug Goldstein. I'm the Director of Profile Investment Services. I'm a certified financial planner and an international investment advisor. Today we're going to be talking about U.S. brokerage accounts for non-U.S. residents and foreigners. If you are a client and not a professional, don't worry. This, in fact, is a presentation that's designed for you. Although professionals might get a lot out of it just to understand some of the rules and regulations, I think it's very important for people who want to invest via the United States to understand some of the rules. Why am I saying via the United States? It's because for most people, when they open a U.S. brokerage account, inside that account they have access not only to U.S. stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, but from there they can invest all over the world, whether it's in international currencies or international bonds, offshore mutual funds. All of this is available through a U.S. brokerage account. So let's go through some of the issues that come up and some of the solutions. Recently I got a call from someone in the United States. It was a colleague of mine who worked at a firm, and he said, "Doug, I'm looking to open an account for a client who lives outside the United States, and I filled out all of the new account paperwork, but when I turned it into the back office, the account was rejected." Now, this is very strange. Normally, accounts are not rejected if the advisor goes through all of the proper steps. And the advisor was told that the reason it was rejected was because the brokerage firm had hit its quota for the year for the number of people it was going to take as new clients from this country. That's one example. A lot of times, if you live outside the United States, you simply can't open the account through a lot of brokerage firms and banks, by the way, because they don't want to have someone who has a non-U.S. address on the account. One of the solutions that people use is they'll lie about their address or they'll use a friend's address, but I don't even want to go there because I think that's a very, very bad idea. What are the issues? Why are the brokerage firms being difficult or apparently difficult? And one of the main things you have to understand is that after 9/11, there was a lot of legislation that was put into place in order to protect the United States. And the method and the reason that they're using brokerage accounts and bank accounts to do this is because the government figured if they could stop the flow of money to terrorists, that would stop the terrorism. So there were a lot of anti-money laundering regulations that were put into place. Unfortunately, they're very, very complicated. Even the brokerage firms and banks find them complicated. And if they make a mistake in a proper filing or keeping track of money, or if a client says he wants to wire money to buy a property and the brokerage firm didn't properly check it out, and it turns out that there was some criminal intent there, the brokerage firm could in fact be held liable for not properly overseeing the wire. A lot of this is related to the Bank Secrecy Act, which has many, many requirements. The cost of complying with these rules is very expensive. Many brokerage firms and banks have had to hire whole teams of lawyers just to deal with these problems. In order to get over the problems, so companies need to know their clients. There's what's called the KYC, the Know Your Client rule, and you have to follow a very strict protocol of getting to know who your client is, what he does, where he lives, what his background is. There's a lot of details. If you've opened an account recently, you probably found that the person you were working with spent a lot of time asking you a lot of personal questions that maybe you weren't used to had you opened an account 10, 15, 20 years ago. A lot of the financial firms in the U.S. today simply feel that they don't or cannot understand their overseas clients and therefore choose not to have the clients. In the end, we can spend all day editorializing about this. I think that the Patriot Act was designed to stop the international money laundering and the financing of terrorism, but the fact is it's not obvious that it has, and it's simply put a lot of barriers to the 99.99% of people who just want to do business through the United States. It's easier, unfortunately, for those of you who are trying it, for the lawyers at the brokerage and bank accounts simply to say, we're not going to take those accounts. On the other hand, I will tell you the good news, which is that there are some firms that specialize in dealing with offshore clients. And I'm using the term offshore very generally to mean anyone living outside the United States, whether that person is a U.S. citizen, in which case he would declare that when he signs a W-9, or if he's a non-U.S. citizen, in which case he would sign a W-8. So let's go through some of the documents that would be required if, in fact, you work with a firm that is able to open a U.S. brokerage account for you. The first thing is you're going to have a new account form. It's going to ask you a lot of details, not only about your name and address and bank accounts, but the form has questions about your trading history, your experience in different types of investments. So you'll be asked, not only have you invested before, but have you invested in stocks, in bonds, in mutual funds, in exchange-traded funds, in options, in currencies, in annuities. It goes on and on. The list is very long. I'm quite familiar with this because I fill out these forms every time I open an account for a new client. The account form also asks for a summary of your financial situation. It's not only that the brokerage firm is required to know this information, but it makes sense for you to share your financial information with your advisor so that he's able to give you actually reasonable advice that is relevant to your situation. There is no one-size-fits-all in the world of money. The brokerage firm will ask you for a copy of an ID. Normally we ask for 2 IDs from people, a government-issued ID, a passport or a driver's license, which we check to make sure that it looks like you. If you are someone who has an IRA, an individual retirement account, which is a type of tax-deferred account normally for Americans, but if you live overseas, you can still have an IRA account, no problem. So there's a special agreement just for that. And if you want to be able to borrow money against your account, so then you'll have to sign a margin agreement. I note that margin and borrowing leverage has a lot more risks, which I'm not going into today, but if this is something you're considering, be sure to talk to your advisor about it. Then you need to sign either a W-8 or a W-9. I mentioned those documents before. A W-8 would be for someone who is a non-U.S. entity. A W-9 would be for a U.S. entity. And this is also something that's used to determine whether you will buy U.S. mutual funds or offshore mutual funds. If, for example, you're a non-U.S. entity, you can still have the account in the United States and you'll be entitled to buy offshore mutual funds. The key benefit for you would be that those funds would not be subject to estate tax, to death tax, meaning that if a non-U.S. entity invests in the United States, there's a potential that that if he dies, then his estate will have to pay tax to the United States, which for people who are not Americans seems very strange, but there are a lot of tools that we use to make sure that this doesn't happen, and one of those is using offshore mutual funds. If you're an American, however, you'll use U.S. mutual funds. For NRAs, non-resident aliens, we'll often ask for a little more identification, which could include an electric bill or a utility bill that simply shows where you live. It's a proof of your address, maybe some more ID. And you should know if you ever need to wire money in or out of the account, you'll be asked about the source of the funds, the reason for the transfer, and a lot of times the compliance officers will ask for a little backup documentation. For example, we had a client buying a property recently. We sent in a wire request, and the compliance officer said, could you please just send us a copy of the purchase contract, which we supplied, and then the wire went out the next day. One big issue that I've seen working with people living outside the United States, even Americans, is that they have an American brokerage account. They may have had it for years and years and years, and all of a sudden they get what we refer to as the Dear John letter. It says, Dear John, thank you very much for having worked with us, but at this point, we can no longer handle your account. So that's even worse than not even being able to open an account, because all of a sudden you're left swimming in the ocean with no one to hold on to. So you've got to find a company to work with who has expertise in cross-border clientele so they can give you reasonable advice. If you live outside the United States, it's usually much more complicated, not only in terms of what investments you can have, but what taxes you're subject to. And you want to make sure that the advisor you're working with is still able to custody your account with a brokerage firm, a major brokerage firm that insures your account by the SIPC, the Security Investor Protection Corporation. The firms that specialize in cross-border clients will, of course, understand all the compliance rules, will understand the currencies and customer care, because when you live overseas, there's more going on in your financial life, let's say, than if you just lived in the United States. You can learn more about what we do at Profile Investments by going to our website, which is www.profile-financial.com. So we've covered it a lot, and I've mentioned a number of different investments, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. Please do not take any of those as a recommendation for what you should do. Before you invest any money, be sure to speak to a qualified financial advisor. If you are someone living outside the United States, or inside the United States for that matter, but particularly overseas clients, and if you're having any of the issues or you have any questions about opening a U.S. brokerage account, or if we can help you there, please be sure to be in touch. Again, my name is Doug Goldstein. I'm a certified financial planner and a cross-border investment advisor, and you can check us out at www.profile-financial.com.